Hi, my name is Barry Stephenson, and I'm here today with Sana Online to talk about what it takes to be a working bass player in today's day and age. All right, so we're going to talk about sound and what it takes to get a good sound, what is a good sound, and how do you achieve that, right? So obviously sound is subjective, what's good, what's bad. It's definitely based on whoever you are as an individual and what you like and what resonates with you, right? So in the context of the bass, the sound that you have has to be readily identifiable as your thing. It has to have a feeling that inspires all the people around you to be their best. And it also has to support the band in a tonal way, depending on the style of music you're playing. So in the example today, we're talking about getting a sound in a jazz ensemble, for instance, or getting a good sound in the double bass for any ensemble that you might have to play in, whether it's jazz, whether it's you're playing with a bluegrass band, whether you're playing with a New Orleans traditional ensemble, or if you're playing with, a funk gig and they happen to, in a jam band scene and you happen to be playing upright. Like, what does it take to get the sound for that situation to inspire everyone around you? So a couple of things you can do. You can think about placement of your hand. So I think of the sound as two different ways, right? For me, the sound, and you might have heard this, the sound is in your hands. No matter what instrument you play, the sound is here. It's all here, all here, all here. So when you're playing, think about how can I get the best sound just with these two things that I have here? What do I need to manipulate with my hands to get the sound that I want for this instrument? So what do we have to do with our hands to achieve the sound that we hear in our head? So first and foremost, once again, the sound comes from listening to a lot of records in the genre that you're trying to perform. So you can get the sound in your ear so you can try and mimic that on your instrument. Step one, get the sound in your ears. Step two, what do I have to do with my hands to achieve that goal? So if I'm playing in the acoustic bass and I want a good pizzicato sound, what are the components of that? Well, you have your left hand and your right hand. The right hand is the sound producer. The left hand is the sound. Just to create a concept of how we're thinking about this. They work together, but think of this as the sound. This is the sound producer. And what I mean by that is when you strike the string, that's producing the sound, is your right hand. That starts the sound, right? That's the beginning of our attack and our articulation. Whether you strike it like that, softly, whether you pull a little harder and dig in, whether you move your hand up here and get a mellower sound, whether you're playing on the side of your finger to get more of it's all types of sounds. This is the sound producer. Now, after you start the note then is shaped by your left hand, right? Your left hand is the sound. So whether that's the sound is still in the left hand. The length of the note is dictated by the left hand. The phrase, the vibrato is all dictated by the left hand. So if you can get that concept of what's doing what and how do we add to make the other hand's life easier, right? We start with the sound producer. Let's start right there. So for the double bass, something that I like to do, and this is, once again, is subjective based on everyone has concepts, but what's worked for me and what I've noticed some of the jazz masters like Ray Brown, Paul Chambers, Ron Carter, who I've had the fortune to study with Ron Carter, and he told me this firsthand, is you want to get a sound where to get the best, biggest sound with the least amount of effort, you want to have your finger, you want to use as much of the side of your finger as possible, right? You want to have your finger dangling just a little bit below the fingerboard. Not all the way down, that's a little weird, but just a little bit, because if you're up here, you have a little bit less resistance than down here. So I'm gonna give you an example where I'm just gonna move my hand up and down the fingerboard. I'm not gonna pull any harder. I'm just gonna move it up in the position of where I'm striking it to show you how that changes the sound that I work with before even adding the left hand. A lot more focused down here. It's a lot more focused, a little bit rounder, a little bit clearer as well in its attack. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to honestly I'm trying to pull through, I'm not plucking. So that's the thing. Like I started on an electric bass, and one of the things I had to stop doing was playing like an electric bass player with the tips of the fingers, right? What you're trying to do for upright is you're trying to pull through the string to the other side. So literally, and you want that percussive sound for a good jazz pizzicato sound, or really any sound that you want to cut through. So I'm pulling through the fingerboard, pulling through the string to the other side, while maintaining a little, like on the side of the finger with a little bit of the finger down below. And on the other side of my hand, I'm making sure my thumb is like a pivot, not like an anchor, because it's not rigidly locked in place. It's kind of pivoting which arm, based on the string that I'm on, so I can actually get the same consistent sound. And with the E string, it's a little difficult because you don't have another string to pull through and rest on. So you kind of have to turn like a doorknob almost is what they teach us. And try to get it to not rattle, which I'm doing a poor job at. But that's what you want, is unaltered, clear sound. Now, something that is a little bit more commonplace now for pizzicato technique, which pizzicato is when you play with your fingers, is to use the two-finger approach, but you're still playing on the side of the finger. So in conclusion with the right hand, it's about placement of your right hand on the fingerboard, where you're actually attacking the string from, regardless. Also, kind of using, you can't see it now because I'm sitting down, but using more of your arm weight and not just your hand and wrist to get the sound. So I'm like actually trying to keep my wrist pretty straight, not breaking it or making it too loose, but kind of keeping it relaxed and pulling with my arm weight more than just fingers, like, or trying to do stuff with just my hand. Because you'll get tired all night trying to do that and you hurt yourself. And the sound's not as big. You need to actually, your sound on your right hand is kind of actually coming from your back shoulder, which is a similar concept if you're using the bow. They tell you to put the bow down as such and trying to pull the bow using your back shoulder blade as opposed to like just your arm. So you get the full weight of the sound. Another practice that doesn't hurt when you're trying to figure out a sound is actually doing long tones with the bow, open string scales. And now that perfectly segues into the left hand, because the left hand, now we learned that this is the sound producer. That starts the note. But what do we do once we stop the note with our hand and we stop playing it with this one? That's where it gets fun. So with the left hand, two concepts for imagery. With the right hand, you can think of it if you, when you were a kid, you used to make like an L shape, like pop gun or whatever. Think of having your hand like an L and actually pulling like this, pulling through the string. And with your right hand, think of it, for the double bass, think of it as a C clamp. So everything is nice and curved. You have like a nice C here, and your second finger is always behind your thumb. C clamp. And with this, you're also trying to play on the fingers, the tips of your fingers, as if it's like a piano hammer, and you're hammering down. So that's kind of the imagery that you're taking for this. Elbow up. And we're going 1, 2, 4 in these lower positions. And when this one is down, when the pinky's down, all 4 fingers have to be down because that's what aids in getting the sound to be clear and gives your pinky the strength it needs to reinforce it. So if I play a note like this, let's just take a B flat, right? If I play it without playing, I'll show you an example of whenever you're not using proper technique, so to speak. It's a little fuzzy. It could be a little not as focused of a sound versus there's a point to that that's just not there. I could try and get it, but it's a lot more muffled of a sound versus when I play on the tip of my finger, the sound also resonates longer too, versus it gets there, but the clarity is not the same as versus that's flat fingers versus so something that you practice is playing scales. I know everyone's, you hear this till you're blue in the face, but scales really are the saving grace. And scales will give you the strength and to tell you the necessary pressure or tension or pressure that you need to push the string down, because there's actually a threshold upon where you're choking the sound out and it's not resonating, you're just hurting yourself, and also where you're not getting you're getting too much buzz. So the perfect sound is in between, where you get the sound, you're not pressing too much, but you're getting enough pressure to allow the instrument to resonate at its fullest capacity. And you want the sound to kind of blossom. So you hit the note, and then it grows. And trying to make the closed notes sound like they're open strings. And with the right hand, once you get to a certain place where the right hand and the left hand are working together, you don't actually have to pull too hard to get a sound, because the harder you pluck, the smaller your sound actually is. Because if I'm going, that's not any louder than me doing this. It actually is clearer, it's more resonant, the sound has time to travel, and it's more focused if you actually play it just at the threshold where you can get the sound to blossom and bloom without having to overdo your attack. Because honestly, you're just gonna hurt yourself. If you do that, imagine trying to spend 4 hours going, I couldn't do it, but some people can, I guess. So one thing to strengthen the left hand is playing scales. So a short example of making sure you have good tone, and if you do it with the bow, it actually forces you to hold the note down longer to get a good sound. And it helps with your intonation, so it's a great idea to use the bow. How that translates to pizzicato playing. I always feel like after I practice like scales with the bow and I play pizzicato, it's like almost the sound is a lot more effortless to achieve than if I don't. So. So now that we've talked about the sound, right? We've talked about the sound producer, this being the sound, getting nice clear notes, getting nice sustained long notes by holding out the notes as long as possible on the tips of the fingers with the left hand, getting a good C shape and all that. Now we're going to talk about, like I said, to be a working bassist, but really a working musician if we're really going to be honest about it, but especially a rhythm section player and a bass player. If you have the sound together, that's the first thing people hear is the sound, right? Does this sound good? If it doesn't sound good, people tend to tune out and you can't move from there. But then the immediate thing they go to afterwards, after that is, does it feel good? Right? And we hear this all the time. We're talking about time feeling, groove. Like, let's dive into that a bit. So what is someone when they say, man, this cat is swinging, or man, they got a good pocket, or, that's a deep groove. What does that mean? It means to me, it means a certain attention to details that this person is paying attention to make that happen. So what are these components? First of all, once again, as I said with sound, the records and listening to records of what groove you're trying to achieve and feel and sound like help you in your understanding of getting closer to who you are and what you sound like and what it's like to have a good groove, right? So check out records that you like from some of your favorite bass players in different styles, whatever style that you're gravitating towards and you're trying to work in predominantly. I recommend keeping an open mind and learning a lot of styles of music and what it takes to make all of those things function, because if you can do that, guess what? You can work more. And for me, what I figured out is the difference between feel and groove is all about the attention to the subdivision of the groove that you're dealing with, the sustain of the note, and the articulation that you're dealing with. So how do we do that in context, right? So we talked about getting a good jazz sound earlier, a good jazz bass pizzicato sound. So if I'm trying to play I'm trying to swing, right? And I just want like some good quarter notes and it to feel good, right? I'm going to be thinking about the triplet subdivision. I'm going to be thinking about the backbeat. I'm going to be thinking about the quarter note having forward motion, all of these things at once. I know that sounds like a lot, but those are the kind of things I'm thinking about to make this particular groove work. And I'll show you how that works. So if I'm going 2, 3, 4, I'm going triplet, 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 triplet in my mind, right? But I'm also going triplet, triplet, triplet. I'm hearing the 2 and 4, but I'm also thinking of quarter notes going like this. So when I swing, I might go, all the while thinking of triplet, 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 and 2 and 4 as well. Ga, da, ga, da. Also the quarter notes. And a secret that I learned from my mentor Rodney Jordan a long time ago. I was playing in church in undergrad. I had, started playing at this Church of God in Christ, and we were playing a lot of different, they're playing spirituals, hymns, we're playing modern music by Ty Tribbett, like all these different things, and we also did a lot of shout music. So I remember I was trying to get my swing feel together and get my notes more connected and more like, just have that sound. And he said, when you're playing shout music, for shout music, you can be, and you have the drums going, so he's like, imagine that feel and just take the 2 away from the snare drum. So you have so instead of even if it's so doom boom 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 boom. Right here. Okay. Da do da da ga. And if you take away the 2 and 4, it's still the same pulse. So that's one way of manipulating that groove, is thinking about what the feel is in the underlying subdivision, right? Now, what about the sustain and the attack of the note? That's what also gives it its characteristics, right, of a groove. Is how you're sustaining the note and how you're articulating the note. So for swing, in this case, I'm articulating the note like I showed you with good technique in the right hand and the left hand, trying to have the notes as long as possible while still giving them their space in between each one, right? So if I'm going, I'm trying to give each note full value. I'm putting a little bit more emphasis on 2 and 4, but not going. It's still each quarter note has to have its given value. It's just there's a little bit more weight behind 2 and 4. But that's coming from you feeling it. You're not necessarily overemphasizing it, except in certain cases where that might be what you want to do in that moment. But generally speaking, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to make those notes feel smooth and even, with the 2 and 4 having more of a hump to it than anything else, right? So let's talk about maybe how we play a swing feel, but let's also talk about a 2 feel, right? Which is like a bass player's bread and butter. Not just in jazz. A 2 feel will take you lots of places. I'll show you how right now. So we have a 2 feel in jazz. Let's just, I might go. Right? So that's like a 2 feel and maybe like a more contemporary swing vibe, right? But now if I were taking that same 2 feel and I wanted to take it down to New Orleans, right, in a brass band or a traditional kind of setting, how would I translate my 2 feel? Well, first of all, from a more modern swing era, or not modern swing, but more hard bop, bebop swing era, it's definitely subdivided by triplets, right? But when I'm thinking of New Orleans music in its various forms, the triplet is still there, but it's more of also like kind of like a duple kind of subdivision. So when I'm thinking of playing a New Orleans 2 beat, I'm thinking of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and ding 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 ding. Still 2 and 4, still ding 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 ding. Now I'm just thinking of it in the duple, which is actually closer to the gospel church thing than people realize. But neither here nor there. So if I'm playing a 2 beat in New Orleans, I might be thinking something like. So walking. So I'm changing the way I'm thinking of the 8th note in the subdivision, even though all the 2 and 4 and the quarter note subdivision are still in place. Now, how am I doing that? I'm making the notes not ring out as much as if I'm playing a 2 and 4 like this. I'm trying to get a little bit more sustained. But when I'm doing this other style, like a New Orleans or a traditional kind of 2-beat feel, I'm shortening the notes by letting up my left hand, which is, once again, remember, the sound. I'm stopping the sound with my left hand. The right hand's doing a little bit of that too, like I might stop it like that as well. But really it's a conjunction of both. And also you could do things like another right hand technique is you can slap. So we're talking about groove, right? And we talked about how articulation in the right hand and the sound shaping of the left hand, all in like the subdivision, all create this thing about feel, time, and groove, how you deal with that. And of course, practice with a metronome. Practice along with records. That's really where you get. If you practice along with records, you'll get further ahead than if you sit around by yourself with a metronome. Although that is very, very good practice too. Because we're talking about being a working basis, and playing along to a metronome is akin to playing along to a click track in the studio. And the easier you have of a time to do that, the more work you're gonna get, which is the name of the game, right? The working bassist. So we're talking about grooves, we're talking about articulation, what it takes to achieve certain grooves, how to subdivide the beat in different styles. And as I said earlier, I think it's important, at least for me, to keep an open mind about the style of music that you like and that you can achieve. Like I grew up playing all type, like, you know, playing heavy metal and punk rock and like hard rock and stuff, and then eventually got into jazz, and then this world of music opened up to me, you know, reggae, ska, funk, blues, even stuff I had been listening to and hearing all my life, but now that I was like studying and getting deep into music, I wanted to check that out and see what that is, to what those different styles need to make them work. And what I found is an astute attention to detail about the length of the note, the placement of the note in terms of the beat and how it feels, and the subdivision that's going, the underlying different subdivisions that are going on have really shown me like, okay, this is what the groove is, right? So let's say if we're thinking, now we're talking about the same two beat, right? What happens if you play a two beat now and you want more of like a bossa nova two beat? So where you're like, now some people say bossa nova is supposed to be, they teach you. And when I went to Brazil, none of the bossa novas felt like that. It felt more like. And what I realized is that it was coming from this drum called the surdo, which was like their bass instrument, but it was a drum that you play with your hand. They would stop the sound, so they go boom, boom, beep, boom, beep, boom, beep, boom, boom, beep, boom, beep. And that was mimicking the bass part, so it was like beep, boom. So I changed the way I'm thinking of the subdivision. I'm thinking of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And they're thinking in duple as well. So everything's 2, 2, 3. And it's a duple kind of thing. You're not really thinking of triplets under that. You're thinking of more of the 16th note. Like, because the pandeiro, the drum is going playing ticka 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 ticka. So that's your underlying subdivision in your feel. And trying to find the dance in that is the most, nobody mentions this, but trying to figure out the underlying dance for any style of music you're playing, whether or not you know how to do that dance, if you can learn how to do it, kudos to you. That makes understanding the rhythmic and groove component that much easier. Just even watching videos of people dance to the style of music that you're playing will hook up your music in a certain way, right? So when I would learn how to play. Now we're thinking of the two beat. The two beat goes a long way, right? The two feel can go from a jazz standard to traditional New Orleans to it can go to a country thing. If you realize it's still two beat, it's just changing the way it feels. Versus like if we're playing a bossa nova two beat. Or samba too, because I do it in the same tempo. Versus if you're doing like a bolero 2 beat, like a. or even if you're doing, let's say now you're doing like a rockabilly 2-beat, right? Like, or not a rockabilly 2-beat. Let's think about if we're doing like a bluegrass 2-beat, right? So what's the difference between me going, if I don't tell you the context of the style? Maybe it's the way I choose to interact that'll make you think about it. It's all about context, style, subdivision, how you're hearing the groove, having reference points, and using all of those at your disposal whenever you need them. Another component to groove that I feel like that has to be stressed too is like, if we're playing, let's say, now let's play a more modern groove, right? Let's play, we're playing like, so it's about how you articulate, how you start the note, and how you end it, right? That's where the groove is. The groove is really in the spaces. So if we're thinking, I'm thinking of, and still thinking of 2 and 4 and the quarter note. I'm thinking of all 3 of those things all at the same time. So I'm going. Trying to figure out what it takes to make that space work in the given groove that I'm given, right? If I'm doing a salsa like a tumbao, I might go. Now I'm thinking of clave. And I'm thinking of how my groove lines up with the clave and the rest of the drums. So the drums might be going ching, 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 ching. It's hard to do at the same time, but you get the point. You're trying to figure out where your groove locks up, where you need to cut the note off and stop it or let it ring. And how you do that will dictate how it feels to the rest of the band, what kind of style you're playing in. So many things are dictated by the length of the note, the articulation, and the weight and the emotional and the intent that you're putting behind it. So that's where the next and crucial, well, the first and foremost the crucial part, listen to as much music as possible. Listen to all the greats, listen to newer music, listen to older music. Try to figure out sounds and how you can create these sounds with your hands on your given instrument, no matter what that style is. Because if you can do that, I guarantee you will be one of the working bassists out here. So we've talked about sound and we've talked about time, feel, / groove, right? So the last component of this whole thing is harmony. How you play the changes. And outlining the changes as a bass player is probably one of the most, it's a function that we have to do and understand. Now, it goes above and beyond just understanding the root note, right? Because sometimes you get called to play bass lines that are not just the root. What if they ask you to play the fifth and you're like, what is the fifth, right? So a basic understanding of chord knowledge, I think, is essential as a bass player. It's not that you need to know how to play piano, but you need to understand how chords are formed and how they're derived and what they come from. That's like step one, right? And I think a good chord progression that is very, very fundamental to understand, no matter what genre you play. I mean, there's certain genres, sure, you can get by without this skill set. But if you're playing modern popular music of any sort, understanding how a blues progression works is key, right? And so as my job and just to give a basic rundown of this, the blues being a 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. That's the basic bare bones blues, right? So if we're playing blues in B flat, we got B flat 7, E flat 7, B flat 7, right? This is just a way to outline the chords. 1, 3, 5, 7, flat 7, 1. Actually, I'm putting the 6 in there too. And so our job is to connect the harmony in a way that actually makes the listener know where they are, which I'm not doing a good job at right now because I'm trying to talk. 4 to the 1, but with the 3 in the bass. The 4 again to the 3 of the 4. 2 chord. So my understanding of where these harmonies come in and what the different chord tones are allow me to create bass lines that are able to navigate the chord changes where I don't have to play the root every time. So I'm not going and make sure I'm getting back to the 1 no matter what my line is. And I just rush back to the 1. That sounds disjointed versus if I were to go. If I were to actually understand how to use motion, whether it be chromatic, scalar. So there's different ways that we outline bass lines in jazz context where you really have to know the chord changes through and through, right? So how do we translate that? Let's say we're not playing jazz. What if we're playing a pop gig with a singer-songwriter and the song happens to be something like, so we're thinking, okay, immediately I'm thinking, what's my key center? Okay, they're probably singing in C major. They're probably playing a triad. And then they're playing in A. Okay, so now we're going to the 6. I understand the scale degrees in which these chords are built on, right? And so the 6 being the 6th scale degree of C major, that's gonna be a minor chord. I just know that. Then if I'm playing the 4, that's an F major in this case, and the 5 is G7. So if I'm playing through the chord changes of the song, understanding that, I can figure out other options as I'm playing, right? So I can go, or other ways to get to the chords as well. So if I were playing 1, 6, 4, 5, right? So that's just one way of, it gives you more options of things that you can play and be more expressive and enhance the music and, you know, more creative ways, given on the moment, of course, right? Harmony has to be used at discretion, discretion. So we're talking about sound, time, feel, and harmony now, and how these things all come to play to make you the optimal working bass player, right? You have to have, a good sound, good feel, and now you have to understand the chord changes to a bunch of songs, depending on the style, the songs of your genre that you're going to play on the gig, and understand what that means and how to play these things, and when you're doing something different, right? So I think a good foundation of learning chord scale theory, like where chords are derived from based on the scale relationship, getting that in your ear, understanding how chords function in terms of moving, and also then you start to get into how substitutions work. And now that's like that can be a whole rabbit hole of a conversation. But essentially, when you use substitutions, you're changing the root of the chord for something that's either a tritone substitution, which is just going to be a tritone away from the root of a dominant chord. So in the case of C major, it's going to be F sharp, right? So if I were doing a bass line in C major, C blues, right? So that would be an example of a tritone sub. But also, there's other substitutions too, or reharmonizations, right? So one way to play a blues is you can play. But it comes from listening to a lot of records. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but listening to records and how these things are used in context, sharpening your skill set about what you know already and how to get deeper into that, and also learning how and when to do these things. Thank you for watching my Sanaa Online Masterclass about bass, sound, time, and feel, and what it means to be a working bass player. And I want you to make sure you stick around for part 2, where we're going to dive into some of the great rhythm section connections in multiple styles of music that bass players have been checking out for decades now.